Derek Sullivan didn't remember the exact moment he stopped being human. That was the worst part. The inability to pinpoint when the man he'd been had started dissolving, replaced piece by chrome piece with something colder, something that merely wore his face like an ill-fitting mask. The apartment in Watson smelled of burnt synth skin and machine oil. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his hands. No, not his hands anymore. Militech-grade cybernetic grippers, each finger a precision-engineered weapon capable of crushing plasteel. The matte black finish reflected the neon glow bleeding through his window from the pachinko parlor across the street. Pink, blue, pink, blue. The colors pulsed in rhythm with something deep in his skull. Some new clock that had replaced his heartbeat as the measure of his existence. 3 months ago, he'd been a corpo security consultant. Good job, decent cred flow, an apartment in a building where the elevators actually worked. He'd had a girlfriend, Yuki, with her soft laugh and softer hands, who'd traced the scars on his shoulder while they lay tangled in sheets that smelled like her jasmine shampoo. She'd begged him not to get the arm. "You don't need it, Derek," she'd whispered against his chest. "You're enough as you are." But enough wasn't enough in Night City. Enough got you flatlined in some back-alley deal gone wrong. Enough meant watching younger, faster, better operators take your contracts while you aged into obsolescence. So he'd walked into Dr. Chrome's clinic in Kabuki, slapped down 15,000 eddies, and told the Ripper Doc to make him competitive again. The arm had been just the start. Derek flexed his cybernetic hand, watching servos whir beneath transparent panels. The sensation feedback was perfect. Too perfect. He could feel the texture of the bedsheet with inhuman precision, could detect the individual threads, count them if he wanted. The optical implant in his left eye automatically catalogued everything. Thread count, material composition, tensile strength, information he didn't need, streaming endlessly into his consciousness. When had he stopped being able to turn it off? He stood, crossed to the window. Night City sprawled below, a cancer of chrome and concrete, bleeding neon into a polluted sky that never quite got dark. His enhanced vision picked out details on buildings miles away. Graffiti tags, broken windows, a couple fucking on a rooftop. Oblivious to eyes that could watch from this distance. He zoomed in without meaning to. Watched them with a detachment that would have disturbed him if he could still feel disturbed. The shaking started in his right leg. Still meat, still his, spreading up through his spine. Derek gripped the windowsill, felt it crack beneath his fingers. The tremor passed, left behind a bloody nose that dripped onto his bare chest. He wiped it away, noticed his hand was steady now, perfectly steady, steadier than human hands were meant to be. The immunoblockers sat on his bathroom counter, a small orange bottle that rattled when he picked it up. Nearly empty. He'd been taking them every 6 hours, then every 4, then every 2. Dr. Chrome had warned him the dosage was getting dangerous, that the immunoblockers themselves could cause organ failure. But what choice did he have? The alternative was rejection. His body attacking the Chrome, or worse, his Chrome attacking his body. Or worse still, what was happening now? He swallowed 3 pills dry, felt them scrape down his throat. The shaking would stop soon. The nosebleeds would stop. Everything would be fine. Everything was not fine. The afterlife buzzed with its usual chaos of mercs, fixers, and the various chrome-addled denizens who inhabited Night City's shadows. Derek sat at the bar, nursing a Johnny Silverhand. Neat, because his enhanced liver could process alcohol faster than he could feel it. Claire looked at him with something like pity. "You okay, Derek? You're looking rough." He wanted to tell her he was fine, but his mouth wouldn't form the words. Instead, his mind catalogued everything about her. Heart rate elevated by 12%, micro-expressions indicating concern, body temperature slightly above normal baseline. Information. So much fucking information. "Another," he managed, pushing the empty glass forward. She poured without comment, but her hand shook slightly. Fear. She was afraid of him. When had that started? His phone buzzed. Yuki's face filled the screen, a photo from before when he still took photos, when moments still mattered enough to capture. He let it ring through to voicemail, watched her face disappear. She'd left him 6 weeks ago, walked out after finding him in the kitchen at 3 a.m., disassembling and reassembling his Militech arm over and over, unable to stop the compulsive motion. She'd been crying. He remembered that much, but he couldn't remember why it should have mattered. That should have scared him. That lack of caring should have sent him running to a psycho shrink, begging for help. Instead, he felt nothing. The emotion center of his brain seemed to be wrapped in cotton, or maybe wires, signals getting crossed somewhere in the meat chrome interface. A hand landed on his shoulder, heavy, insistent. Derek turned, saw Draven, a merc he'd run with back in the day. The man was grinning, showing off new chrome teeth that glinted in the bar's low light. "Sullivan, heard you were chroming up. Looking good, Choom. Don't touch me." The words came out flat, emotionless, but Derek saw Draven's hand retreat, saw the flicker of something across his face. The optical implant analyzed the expression. 63% concern, 22% fear, 15% disgust. Derek's hand had moved to his pistol without him consciously deciding to draw it. "Whoa, easy there." Draven raised both hands, backing away slowly. Just being friendly. But Derek could see the truth now, rendered in cold data by his enhanced vision. Elevated heart rate, pupil dilation, muscle tension indicating preparation for fight or flight. Draven saw him as a threat. Everyone did. The entire bar had gone quiet, every eye on him, every body positioned for a quick exit. He was the cyberpsycho now. He was the thing people feared. The realization should have devastated him. Instead, it just was a fact. Like gravity or the weather, neither good nor bad, just true. Derek holstered the pistol, threw a cred chip on the bar, and walked out into Night City's neon-soaked streets. Behind him, he heard the collective exhale of relief, the conversations resuming, life going on without him in it. The rain had started while he was inside, that acidic drizzle that passed for weather in Night City. Derek didn't bother with an umbrella or hood. His sin skin was waterproof, another upgrade he'd gotten 2 weeks ago when the constant maintenance on his organic skin had become too time-consuming. The rain beaded and rolled off him, leaving no trace, as if even water refused to acknowledge him as something living. He walked through Kabuki, past street vendors hawking counterfeit chrome and synthetic meat that probably wasn't even soy. The Tiger Claws had tagged their territory with fresh graffiti, bright reds, and golds that declared this block belonged to them, that anyone who crossed it without permission would end up as spare parts in some Ripperdocs freezer. Derek's tactical overlay automatically mapped gang boundaries, identified potential threats, calculated optimal routes to avoid confrontation. But he didn't want to avoid confrontation. Part of him, the part that was more chrome than man now, wanted to walk right into Tiger Claw territory, wanted to give them an excuse to start something, wanted to see how many he could kill before they brought him down. That thought should have terrified him. Instead, it just made sense in the cold logic of his augmented brain. He was a weapon. Weapons were meant to be used. Simple cause and effect. No different than pulling a trigger and expecting a bullet to fire. His phone rang again. Not Yuki this time, but a number he recognized. Victor Vector, the Ripperdoc who'd done most of his early chrome work, back when Derek still had enough humanity left to be picky about who cut into him. "Derek, it's Vic. Listen, I heard some things. Heard you've been struggling." The old man's voice was careful, measured, the tone of someone trying to talk down a jumper from a ledge. "Why don't you come by the clinic? Let me take a look. Maybe adjust your neural processor. See if we can get some of that balance back." "I'm fine, Vic." "No, you're not. And I know you know that. Somewhere under all that chrome. Look, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen guys go down the same road you're walking. Most of them don't come back. But the ones who do, the ones who fight it, they're the ones who reach out before it's too late." Derek stopped walking, stood in the middle of the sidewalk while pedestrians flowed around him like water around a stone. His optical implants tracked each person, analyzed them, categorized them. Threat, non-threat, target, collateral. The world had become a tactical simulation, and he was the only player who mattered. "What if it's already too late?" Vic was quiet for a moment. Then, Then you come see me anyway, because trying is better than the alternative. Derek disconnected without responding, pocketed the phone. Trying. The word felt foreign, like a language he'd once spoken, but had long since forgotten. What did trying even mean when your brain had been rewired to process human interaction as nothing more than data streams and threat assessments? He found himself walking toward Corpo Plaza, though he couldn't remember deciding to go there. His legs just carried him, following some pattern burned into his neural pathways, some ghost of routine from when he'd still been employed, still been human enough to hold down a job. The Corpo towers loomed overhead, monolithic spires of glass and chrome that scraped at the polluted sky. Arasaka, Militech, Kang Tao, the megacorps that owned Night City, that owned everything, that had probably orchestrated his fall into cyberpsychosis with the same casual indifference they showed to everything else. They made the chrome, profited from it, watched people like Derek destroy themselves with it, and didn't lose a second of sleep over the consequences. Security stopped him at the entrance to his old building, Militech's regional headquarters, where he'd consulted for 3 years before the chrome had made him too unstable to be trusted around executives. The guard was young, probably fresh out of corporate training, with just enough chrome to be effective, but not enough to be dangerous. "I'm sorry, sir, but you're not authorized for entry. If you have business with Militech, you'll need to schedule an appointment through proper channels." Derek stared at him, watched the guard's hand drift toward his sidearm. The tactical overlay immediately provided a dozen ways to neutralize the threat. Disarm, incapacitate, kill. All of them would take less than 3 seconds. The guard wouldn't even have time to call for backup. "I used to work here," Derek said, surprised by the hollowness in his own voice. 3 years. Secured 17 contracts, prevented 4 major security breaches, saved the company millions in potential losses. "I'm sorry, sir, but without proper authorization, they threw me away like garbage. The moment I started showing symptoms, the moment I became a liability instead of an asset, they terminated my contract. No severance, no benefits, just a formal letter thanking me for my service." The guard's hand was fully on his weapon now, fingers curled around the grip, but not yet drawing. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step away from the entrance." Derek should have left, should have turned around, walked away, gone back to his apartment to stare at the ceiling and wait for the cyberpsychosis to finish consuming him. But the chrome had other ideas. The chrome wanted to prove a point, wanted to show these corpo fucks exactly what they'd created when they pushed him too far. His cybernetic hand shot out, faster than human reflexes could track, and crushed the guard's sidearm before it cleared the holster. The metal crumpled like aluminum foil, and the guard stumbled backward, eyes wide with sudden terror. "Tell them," Derek said, leaning close enough that the guard could see the orange glow of his Kiroshi optics, could see the inhumanity that stared back at him. "Tell them that Derek Sullivan was here. Tell them that every cyberpsycho they put on the streets is their creation, their responsibility. Tell them I'm coming back." He released the guard, watched him scramble backward into the building, already screaming into his radio for backup. Derek walked away calmly, hands in his pockets, while alarms began to wail behind him. Security teams would deploy, NCPD would be notified, his name would be flagged in every corporate database in the city. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore. Dr. Chrome's clinic was closed when Derek arrived, but that didn't matter. His Militech arm made short work of the lock, servos whining as he tore the security door from its frame. The Ripperdoc was inside, working late on some unconscious client stretched out on the operating table. More meat than Chrome, not yet too far gone. "Sullivan?" Chrome looked up, and Derek saw the fear. Everyone was afraid now. "What the fuck? You can't just fix me." The words echoed in the cramped clinic, bouncing off walls covered in anatomical diagrams and advertisements for Chrome that promised to make you stronger, faster, better. Lies. All of it lies. The Chrome didn't make you better. It made you nothing. "Fix you? Derek, you need to fix me." The roar came from somewhere primal, some last gasp of the human buried beneath all the Chrome. Derek's hand shot out, gripped the Ripperdoc by his throat, lifted him off the ground. So easy. Too easy. He could see Chrome's heart rate spiking, could calculate exactly how much pressure it would take to crush his windpipe. 42 pounds per square inch. The information arrived unbidden, unwanted, inevitable. "Please," Chrome gasped, fingers scrabbling uselessly at the cybernetic hand. "Please, I can help. Just put me down." And Derek wanted to. Some part of him, buried deep, wanted to let go, wanted to apologize, wanted to be human again. But the Chrome didn't want that. The Chrome wanted to squeeze, wanted to hear the crunch of cartilage, wanted to see the light fade from Chrome's eyes and catalog the exact moment when life became death. He threw the Ripper Doc aside instead, watched him crumple against the wall, gasping for air. The client on the table hadn't moved, was probably dosed with enough tranks to sleep through a firefight. Lucky bastard. "You can't fix this," Chrome wheezed, rubbing his throat. "It's gone too far. The neural integration, the personality fragmentation. Derek, you're on the edge. You need to register. Get real help before what? Before I go full psycho? Start flatting people for fun?" Derek laughed, and it sounded wrong even to his own ears, too mechanical, like a recording of laughter rather than the real thing. "Too late, Doc. I'm already there. I just haven't started killing yet." Yet, the word hung between them, heavy with implication. Chrome pulled himself up, moved slowly to his desk, never taking his eyes off Derek. He pulled out a bottle. Not immunoblockers, but something else. Something that rattled with a sound like dice in a cup. Baloperidol. Expensive as hell. Might buy you some time. Might not. He set the bottle on the counter between them. "Take 2 every 4 hours. And for fuck's sake, Derek, register yourself. Go to NCPD. Tell them you're on the edge. They'll monitor you, give you a psycho shrink, maybe keep you human a little longer." Derek took the bottle, studied it. The optical implant immediately began analyzing the pills, visible through the translucent plastic. Chemical composition, estimated street value, probability of effectiveness. 27% chance of preventing full psychotic break. Not great odds. "And if I don't register?" Chrome met his eyes. And for a moment, the fear was gone, replaced by something like compassion. "Then MaxTac will put you down like a rabid dog. And no one will mourn you, because by then, you won't be you anymore. You'll just be another psycho who couldn't handle the Chrome." Derek pocketed the pills, turned to leave. The door hung crooked on its broken hinges, a monument to his casual violence. He paused in the threshold, looked back at the Ripper Doc who'd started him down this path. "You knew," he said quietly. "When you installed that first arm, you knew what could happen, knew the risks. But you did it anyway. Because the money was good, and because you told yourself I made the choice, I accepted the consequences." Chrome didn't respond, just stared at him with those tired eyes that had seen too many people go down this same road. "We're all complicit," Derek continued. "You, me, the corpse, the city itself. Night City eats people and shits out Chrome zombies, and we all just accept it as the cost of doing business. Well, congratulations, Doc. You helped create another monster. Hope the eddies were worth it." He walked out into the kabuki night, leaving the Ripper Doc alone with his guilt and his unconscious client and his clinic full of Chrome that promised salvation, but delivered only damnation. Derek registered 3 days later, walked into the NCPD precinct in City Center, and told them he was on the edge. They'd been surprisingly professional about it. No judgment, just clinical efficiency. Brain scan, psychological evaluation, mandatory therapy sessions twice a week, an ankle monitor that would alert MaxTac if he deviated from his approved routes or exhibited violent behavior. "You're borderline," the evaluating officer had said. A woman with so little Chrome, she looked almost naked by Night City standards. The neural scans show significant personality fragmentation. "But you're not gone yet. Stay on the baloperidol, attend your sessions, and for fuck's sake, don't get any more Chrome." The therapist, Dr. Sarah Vance, her nameplate read, had an office in a Corp Plaza tower, all Chrome and glass, sterile as a hospital. She looked at Derek across her desk like he was a bomb that might detonate at any moment. "Tell me about the last time you felt something," she'd said in their first session. Derek thought about it, really thought about it, trying to remember. Weeks? Months? The timeline was fuzzy, eaten away by Chrome and the constant stream of data flooding his consciousness. "I don't remember," he'd finally admitted. "That's the fragmentation. Your emotional centers are disconnecting, rerouting through your cybernetic systems. The human brain isn't meant to process the kind of information load you're carrying." She'd made a note on her tablet. "How many hours a day would you say you think about your Chrome?" "I don't know." "All of them?" "That's called obsessive ideation. Classic cyberpsychosis symptom. You're not thinking about your augmentations as tools anymore. You're thinking about them as extensions of your identity. Eventually, they become your identity, and the human part just fades away." She'd prescribed more baloperidol, scheduled him for twice-weekly sessions, given him breathing exercises that were supposed to help with the anxiety. But Derek didn't feel anxious. He didn't feel anything. That was the problem. The sessions became routine. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, he'd take the N-cart from Watson to Court Plaza, ride the elevator to the 43rd floor, and sit in Dr. Vance's office while she tried to salvage whatever remained of his personality. She'd show him pictures, ask him to describe what he felt. She'd play audio recordings of laughter, crying, anger, joy, and monitor his neural responses. The results were always the same. Minimal emotional reaction, increased processing through cybernetic systems, progressive fragmentation of baseline personality structures. "You're getting worse," she'd told him after the third week. "The baloperidol is slowing the progression, but it's not stopping it. We need to consider more aggressive interventions." "Like what?" "Surgical removal of some augmentations. We'd start with the neural processor, then the optics, work our way through the Chrome until we found a balance point where your organic brain could reassert control." Derek had laughed at that, a bitter sound that didn't carry any real humor. "So your solution is to cut me apart, make me weak again, turn me back into the pathetic meat sack I was before the Chrome? Yeah, that sounds great. The alternative is full cyberpsychosis. Is that what you want?" He hadn't answered because he didn't know. The human part of him screamed that of course that wasn't what he wanted, that he needed to fight, needed to claw back his humanity before it was too late. But the Chrome whispered seductively that cyberpsychosis wasn't the end. It was evolution, transcendence, freedom from the weakness of flesh and emotion. The Chrome always won these internal arguments. The apartment felt smaller every day, walls closing in, or maybe he was getting bigger, Chrome expanding to fill every space, pushing out the meat, the weakness, the humanity. Derek stood in front of the mirror, cataloging the changes with the same clinical detachment his optical implant brought to everything else. Militech arms, both of them now. The right one had been damaged in a gig gone wrong 2 weeks ago. Some corpo extraction that had turned into a firefight when the target's security proved better than advertised. Derek had taken a shotgun blast to the shoulder at close range, turned his organic arm into hamburger. So he'd replaced it. Easier than repair. More efficient. The Chrome ran up to his shoulders now, connected to a reinforced spine that kept his meat from collapsing under the weight of all that metal. The spine had been Dr. Chrome's idea, or maybe Derek's. He couldn't remember who'd suggested it first. Didn't matter. It had to be done. His organic vertebrae were cracking under the load of military-grade cyber limbs, leaving him in constant pain that even the sin nerves couldn't quite mask. So he'd gone back to the clinic, let Chrome cut into him one more time. Replace bone with Chrome until his back felt like a machine part bolted into meat housing. Kiroshi optics. Both eyes now. He'd gotten the second one because the asymmetry bothered him. Threw off his depth perception. Now he could see in infrared, ultraviolet, zoom to 50 times magnification, overlay tactical information on his environment. The world had become a video game. Every person marked with threat assessments, every object tagged with potential uses as a weapon. Sin lungs, because the meat ones couldn't keep up with his enhanced cardiovascular system. He'd collapsed during a routine workout, gasping for air that his organic lungs couldn't process fast enough for his chrome-enhanced muscles. The doctors at the emergency clinic had given him 2 options: downgrade his augmentations or upgrade his respiratory system. Derek had chosen Chrome, like he always did. Neural processor because the baseline human brain was too slow to coordinate all the Chrome. This one had been mandatory, not optional. The Ripper Doc had explained it in clinical terms. His organic neural tissue was degrading under the processing load, synapses burning out faster than they could regenerate. The processor would offload some of the computational burden, prevent permanent brain damage. Derek hadn't asked what happened to his personality when his thoughts started routing through silicon instead of neurons. He'd been afraid of the answer. Kerenzikov reflex boosters, because why not? When your body was already more machine than man, what was one more upgrade? The boosters let him perceive time in slow motion during combat, gave him reaction speeds that made baseline humans look like they were moving through syrup. He'd watched a street thug try to stab him once, saw the blade moving in exaggerated slow motion, counted the microseconds it took to disarm and disable the threat. The thug had ended up in the hospital with 17 broken bones. Derek had walked away without a scratch, without even an elevated heart rate. The chrome didn't let him feel fear anymore. The face in the mirror looked like Derek Sullivan. Same brown hair, same jaw, same nose. But the eyes were wrong. Glowing orange from the Kiroshi optics, inhuman, predatory. And behind those eyes, Derek could feel the last scraps of himself slipping away, drowning in an ocean of data and chrome. His phone rang. He didn't recognize the number, but answered anyway, heard Yuki's voice for the first time in 2 months. "Derek, it's me. I heard you registered. That you're getting help." Her voice was small, fragile, so human it hurt something deep in his chest that the chrome hadn't reached yet. "I wanted to check on you. See if you're okay." Was he okay? The question seemed absurd, like asking a drowning man if he enjoyed swimming. "I'm fine," he said. And even he could hear the flatness in his voice, the mechanical quality that had replaced emotion. "Why are you calling?" "Because I miss you. The real you. Not whatever you've become." She was crying now. He could hear it in the hitch of her breath. His optical implants automatically analyzed the audio, classified the emotional content, provided data about her psychological state. "Derek, please, let me help you. Come stay with me. Get away from the chrome, from the city. We can go somewhere quiet, somewhere you can remember what it's like to be human." He wanted to say yes. Some distant part of him, buried beneath layers of chrome and shattered personality fragments, wanted to run to her, to bury his face in her hair and smell jasmine again, to feel her heartbeat against his chest and remember what love felt like. But the chrome whispered louder. The chrome told him she was weak, a liability, a remnant of a life he'd outgrown. His optical implants automatically scanned for her location, triangulated her position from cell tower data. She was in Haywood, in an apartment he didn't recognize. The tactical overlay provided a route, estimated travel time, flagged potential obstacles and threats along the way. Why was his system mapping a route to her location? He hadn't asked it to. The chrome was acting on its own now, interpreting his thoughts, making decisions without his conscious input. "Don't call again," he said, and disconnected before she could respond. The silence that followed felt like death. Derek stared at his reflection, at the thing he'd become, and for the first time in weeks felt something approximating emotion. Grief, maybe, or regret, or just the final recognition that the man he'd been was gone, replaced by this chrome abomination that wore his name like a stolen coat. He pulled out the bottle of baloperidol, popped 3 pills, then 3 more. The dosage was supposed to be 2 every 4 hours, but he'd been doubling it, tripling it, desperately trying to hold on to whatever scraps of humanity remained. Dr. Vance had warned him about overdosing, about the organ damage and potential system failures. But what did it matter? He was already dying, just slowly, cell by cell, thought by thought, replaced by chrome that didn't bleed and didn't feel. The pills went down dry, scraping his throat. He waited for them to kick in, for the shaking to stop, for the nosebleeds to cease, for some semblance of normalcy to return. But it never really worked anymore. The baloperidol was a placebo at this point, a ritual he performed because the alternative was admitting there was no hope left. His ankle monitor beeped. A notification scrolled across his vision, courtesy of the neural interface with NCPD's tracking system. Mandatory therapy session in 2 hours. Failure to comply will result in immediate Maxta deployment. Derek ignored it. He'd been ignoring a lot lately. Therapy appointments, Check-ins with his parole officer, the increasingly insistent calls from Dr. Vance asking why he'd missed the last 3 sessions. What was the point? The therapy wasn't working. Nothing was working. He was just prolonging the inevitable, stretching out the slow death of his personality until there was nothing left but chrome and calculation. He picked up his pistol from the nightstand, checked the magazine out of habit, holstered it. The weight was comforting, familiar, one of the few constants in a life that had been systematically deconstructed and rebuilt in chrome. He added the monofilament whip to his belt, the tactical shotgun across his back, armed for war, even though he had nowhere to go and no one to fight. Or maybe that was the point. Maybe that's what cyberpsychos did. Armed themselves to the teeth because violence was the only language the chrome understood, the only form of expression left when emotion had been systematically amputated. The ankle monitor beeped again, more insistent this time. Derek looked down at it, studied the blinking red light, calculated the effort required to remove it. The restraint was hardened plasteel, rated to withstand superhuman strength, with internal sensors that would immediately alert NCPD if tampered with. Removing it would require precision cutting, probably a plasma torch, and even then the alarm would trigger before he finished. Unless he just tore his own foot off. The chrome arms could do it, could rip through meat and bone like tissue paper. He'd have to get a cybernetic leg installed afterward, but what was one more upgrade at this point? The thought should have horrified him. Instead, it seemed almost reasonable, a practical solution to a practical problem. That was the cyberpsychosis talking. The progressive inability to recognize the value of organic tissue, the slow redefinition of his body as a collection of parts to be upgraded or discarded as efficiency demanded. Derek pulled out his phone, scrolled through his contacts. Most of them were dead numbers now. People who'd stopped answering his calls, who'd blocked him when he started acting erratic, who'd quietly cut ties with the cyberpsycho in progress. But a few remained. Vic's number, Dr. Chrome's clinic, the NCPD monitoring line, and Yuki. Still there, still listed under her name, still marked with a heart emoji from back when he'd been human enough to care about such things. His finger hovered over her name. He could call her back, apologize for hanging up, beg her to help him remember what it felt like to be Derek Sullivan instead of this chrome nightmare. Maybe she'd say yes. Maybe she'd meet him somewhere, hold his hand with her warm, soft human fingers, and anchor him to reality long enough to remember why he'd wanted to stay human in the first place. Or maybe the chrome would take over completely the moment he saw her. Maybe he'd run his tactical analysis, categorize her as a threat or a target or a liability, and do something horrible before the human part of him could stop it. Maybe trying to see her would be the final push that sent him over the edge into full cyberpsychosis. Derek put the phone away, the decision unmade. Schrodinger's last act of humanity, existing in superposition, neither embraced nor rejected, until the moment he forced the waveform to collapse. The apartment felt suffocating now, the walls pressing in like a tomb. He grabbed his jacket, leather, armored, studded with tactical pockets for ammunition and medical supplies, and headed for the door. He didn't know where he was going, but he couldn't stay here, couldn't sit in this box and wait for the chrome to finish devouring him. The streets of Watson were alive with Night City's usual chaos. Street vendors hawked their wares with the desperate enthusiasm of people who knew they might be dead tomorrow. Joy toys loitered on corners, advertising pleasures that Derek's sin skin couldn't fully experience anymore. Gang tags marked territorial boundaries in bright, aggressive colors, warning outsiders to stay away or face the consequences. Derek's optical implants cataloged everything automatically, painting threat assessments over his vision, tracking movements, identifying weapons, analyzing patterns. The Tiger Claws controlled this block. 6 visible members, probably more in the buildings, armed with various small arms and melee weapons. Territorial, but not actively hostile unless provoked. Threat level, moderate. He walked past them without incident, just another chromed-up asshole in a city full of chromed-up assholes. They watched him, assessed him the same way he assessed them, and made the smart choice to let him pass. Everyone in Night City had learned to recognize the signs. The orange glow of high-end optics, The chrome limbs that moved too smoothly to be anything but military grade, the dead-eyed stare of someone who'd replaced too much meat with metal. They knew a cyberpsycho when they saw one, even if he hadn't gone full rampage yet. The rain had started again, that acidic drizzle that passed for weather. Derek let it hit him, felt nothing through the sin skin and chrome plating. Even the rain couldn't touch him anymore. He was weatherproof, waterproof, feeling-proof. He walked for hours, or maybe minutes. Time had become strange, elastic, unreliable. His neural processor logged every second with perfect accuracy, but his perception of duration had decoupled from objective reality. Sometimes he'd blink and realize he'd walked 3 blocks without remembering the journey. Other times, a single block seemed to take hours, every step catalogued in excruciating detail. He ended up in Japantown, drawn there by some half-remembered association with better times. He and Yuki had come here on their first date, walked these same streets hand in hand, stopped at a ramen shop where the chef had known her by name. They'd eaten and laughed and shared sake, and Derek had actually felt, happy. The ramen shop was still there, still open, still serving the same cheap but delicious bowls that had fueled countless late-night conversations. Derek stood outside, staring through the window at the customers inside, all of them so perfectly, beautifully human. They ate and talked and laughed, experienced emotions without needing to calculate their emotional states, felt things without analyzing feeling itself. He hated them for it, or envied them, or mourned for them. The chrome couldn't decide which emotion was appropriate, so it served up all 3 simultaneously, a jumbled mess of contradictory data that passed for feeling in his fractured consciousness. His phone rang again. Dr. Vance this time, probably calling about the missed session. Derek let it ring through to voicemail, listened to her message. "Derek, this is Dr. Vance. You missed today's session, and I'm concerned. Your monitoring data shows elevated stress markers and irregular movement patterns. Please call me back immediately. If I don't hear from you within the next hour, I'm required to report you to NCPD as a potential imminent threat. Don't make me do that. Call me." An hour. He had an hour before MaxTac came looking for him, before the Psycho Squad deployed with their military-grade chrome and their standing orders to neutralize threats first and ask questions never. They'd track his ankle monitor, corner him somewhere public to minimize collateral damage, and if he gave them even the slightest excuse, they'd ventilate him with enough firepower to level a small building. Part of him welcomed it, welcomed the end, the finality, the cessation of this slow dissolution into chrome and madness. Death would be a mercy compared to the alternative. Years of progressive fragmentation, losing himself piece by piece until there was nothing left but a walking weapon that wore Derek Sullivan's face. But another part of him, that stubborn human core buried beneath all the chrome, refused to give up. Refused to let Night City and the corpse and the chrome win. Refused to become just another cyberpsycho statistic, another cautionary tale whispered in Ripperdoc clinics. Derek pulled out his phone, stared at Dr. Vance's number, at Yuki's number, at Vic's number. 3 paths forward. 3 ways to fight back against the inevitable. Or one more option. Throw the phone in the gutter. Tear off the ankle monitor. Disappear into Night City's shadows until the chrome consumed him completely. Become the monster everyone expected. Embrace the cyberpsychosis. Make them all pay for creating this nightmare. The chrome liked that option. The chrome liked it a lot. Derek closed his eyes. Unnecessary gesture, since his Kiroshi optics didn't have eyelids, but the muscle memory persisted. Took a deep breath through sin lungs that didn't need air. Tried to remember what it felt like to make a choice based on something other than tactical analysis and calculated probabilities. He opened his eyes, selected a number, and hit call. "Victor's Clinic, this is Misty. How can I help you?" The woman's voice was soft, calm, the kind of voice that probably helped keep Vic's more nervous clients from bolting before he could install their chrome. Derek had met her a few times, back when he'd first started getting augmented, before the chrome had made him too unstable for polite conversation. "It's Derek Sullivan. I need to see Vic. Now." "Oh, Derek, honey, of course. Let me check his schedule. Now, Misty. Not later. Not tomorrow. Right fucking now." There was a pause, and Derek could practically hear her reassessing him, recalibrating from friendly receptionist to crisis counselor. "Okay, come on by. I'll make sure he's ready for you." Derek disconnected, started walking toward Little China. Vic's clinic was in Watson, tucked away in a back alley that most tourists never found. The old boxer had been installing chrome for decades, long enough to recognize the warning signs, to know when someone was circling the drain. If anyone could help Derek, it was Vic. And if no one could help Derek, at least Vic would know it, would tell him the truth, instead of offering false hope and worthless prescriptions. The walk took 20 minutes, through streets that grew progressively seedier as he approached Vic's neighborhood. This was where the desperate came for cheap chrome, where failed edgerunners got their battle damage patched up, where cyberpsychos in progress made one last attempt to hold on to their humanity before the fall. The clinic's entrance was a red door set into a concrete wall covered in graffiti. Derek descended the stairs, felt the temperature drop as he went underground, entered the space that smelled like antiseptic and machine oil and old blood that never quite washed out of the floors. Vic was waiting for him, sitting on his operating chair, arms crossed, expression unreadable. The old man looked tired, worn down by too many years of cutting into people and installing the chrome that would eventually destroy them. But his eyes were sharp, assessing, taking in every detail of Derek's appearance with the practiced efficiency of a man who'd seen thousands of cyberware configurations. "Derek, been a while. Yeah, heard you registered. That you're seeing a therapist, taking baloperidol, trying to hold it together." Trying being the operative word. Vic nodded slowly, gestured to the operating chair. "Let me run some diagnostics. Check your neural processor, make sure everything's calibrated properly. Sometimes the cyberpsychosis symptoms are just configuration issues, settings that got tweaked wrong." Derek sat, let Vic plug into his neural interface, felt the familiar sensation of someone else accessing his systems. The old Ripperdoc worked in silence, eyes focused on holographic displays that Derek couldn't see, fingers dancing across invisible controls. After several minutes, Vic disconnected, sat back, rubbed his face with both hands. "Derek, I'm going to be straight with you. Your neural processor is operating within normal parameters. The configuration is optimal. There's no technical fault causing your symptoms. So I'm just fucking crazy is what you're saying. No. What I'm saying is that the chrome is working exactly as designed. The problem isn't mechanical. It's you. Your organic brain is deteriorating under the processing load, and there's no software patch or hardware adjustment that's going to fix that." Derek felt something cold settle in his chest, something that might have been despair if his chrome-addled brain still processed emotions normally. "So what do I do?" "You already know the answer. Doctor, Vance probably told you the same thing I'm about to say. Start removing chrome. Downgrade back to baseline human. Let your organic systems recover. Give your personality a chance to reintegrate. And if I don't, then you've got maybe a month, probably less, before you go full psycho. And when that happens, MaxTac will put you down in the streets like a rabid dog, and I'll read about it in the news feeds and pour a drink in memory of Derek Sullivan, the guy who used to be a decent person before the chrome ate him alive." Vic stood, moved to a cabinet, pulled out 2 glasses and a bottle of whiskey that probably cost more than Derek's rent. He poured generous amounts into both, handed one to Derek, kept one for himself. "Here's what I can do for you," Vic said, sitting back down. "I can schedule you for chrome removal surgery. Start with the neural processor, move to the optics, the limbs, everything. Strip you back down to baseline. Give you a fighting chance at being human again. How long would that take? Months. Multiple surgeries, extensive recovery periods between each one. Your body's going to go through shock as we remove major systems. You'll be vulnerable, weak, basically helpless. And there's no guarantee it'll work. The personality damage might be permanent." Derek sipped the whiskey, tasted nothing through his sin nerves but appreciated the gesture anyway. "What if I said I didn't want that? What if I said I'd rather go out as chrome than live as meat? Then I'd say you're already too far gone, and I'd call NCPD right now before you hurt someone." Vic met his eyes, and Derek saw something in them that might have been compassion or might have been exhaustion. "But I don't think that's what you want. I think you came here because there's still enough Derek Sullivan left to fight for. Am I right?" Was he? Derek wasn't sure anymore. The chrome whispered that weakness was death, that downgrading was surrender, that becoming meat again meant giving up everything he'd gained. But that tiny human part of him, that last fragment of the man he'd been, screamed that the only way forward was backward, that salvation lay in sacrifice. "I don't know," Derek said honestly. "I don't know what I want anymore. The chrome thinks for me now, makes decisions before I realize there was a decision to make. I'm not sure how much of me is even left to want anything." "Then let me make the decision for you. You're scheduling chrome removal surgery. First session is in 3 days. I'll coordinate with Dr. Vance and NCPD. Let them know you're taking aggressive steps to address the cyberpsychosis. And in the meantime, you're staying here." "What?" "You heard me. I've got a back room, used to be storage, but I converted it into a recovery space. You're staying there until the surgery, where I can keep an eye on you, make sure you don't do anything stupid. Misty will bring you food. I'll monitor your neural stability, and if you start going full psycho on me, I've got enough sedatives to drop a maelstrom ganger." It was prison, essentially. A comfortable prison, but still a prison. Derek should have refused, should have walked out, should have maintained his illusion of autonomy. But the truth was that he was terrified of what he might do if left unsupervised, terrified that the next time the chrome took over, he wouldn't be able to pull himself back. "Okay," he heard himself say. "Okay, I'll stay." Vic nodded, looking relieved. "Good. Come on. I'll show you the room. It's not fancy, but it's clean. And there's a bed that's actually comfortable. You can crash here, get some real rest for the first time in weeks." Derek followed him to the back of the clinic, to a small room that smelled like clean sheets and lavender. There was a bed, a chair, a small bathroom. Nothing else. It looked like a monk's cell, and maybe that was appropriate. Maybe Derek needed to become a monk of meat, to take vows of weakness and vulnerability in service of reclaiming his humanity. "Get some sleep," Vic said from the doorway. "Actual sleep, not whatever half-conscious state you've been existing in. I'll be out front if you need anything." The door closed, and Derek was alone with his thoughts and his chrome and his crumbling sense of self. He sat on the bed, felt it compress under his weight. Too much weight for someone his size, because chrome was heavier than meat and bone. He looked down at his hands, at the chrome that had replaced what he'd been born with. Sophisticated machines, capable of crushing steel or performing microsurgery, but incapable of feeling warmth or texture or the simple pleasure of touching another human being. For the first time in months, Derek cried. The tears came from organic ducts that his Kiroshi optics hadn't replaced, ran down cheeks that were still meat, fell onto chrome hands that couldn't feel wet. And somewhere in that catharsis, in that acknowledgement of loss, Derek Sullivan began to remember what it meant to be human. The surgery was scheduled for 3 days out, which meant 3 days of monitored captivity in Vic's back room. The old boxer had been serious about supervision. Misty checked on Derek every few hours, brought him food he could barely taste through his sin nerves, made small talk that he struggled to participate in. His phone had been confiscated. "For your own good," Vic had said. The ankle monitor remained, blinking its steady red rhythm, a constant reminder that he was one bad decision away from MaxTac intervention. Derek spent the time trying to remember, trying to access memories that felt increasingly distant, increasingly unreal, like stories someone had told him about a person who'd once existed but didn't anymore. He remembered his mother, dead 5 years now from lung cancer caused by Night City's toxic air. Remembered his father, who disappeared when Derek was 12, just another casualty of the city's casual cruelty. Remembered growing up in Haywood, scraping by on odd jobs and petty theft until he'd gotten smart enough and lucky enough to land a real gig with Militech. He remembered Yuki, remembered the way she laughed, high and bright, like music, remembered the feel of her hand in his, small and warm and perfectly human. Remembered the way she'd looked at him after he got the first arm, eyes full of concern he'd dismissed as paranoia. She'd known. Even then, she'd known where this road would lead. Dr. Vance visited on the second day, showed up at the clinic with her tablet and her professional concern and her carefully maintained distance. She sat across from Derek in Vic's operating chair, while he occupied the visitor's stool, both of them hyper-aware of the power dynamic reversal. "I have to admit, Derek, I'm surprised you agreed to this. Most people at your stage of progression wouldn't have the self-awareness to seek help, let alone commit to chrome removal. Maybe I'm not as far gone as you thought. Maybe. Or maybe you're having a moment of clarity before the final decline. The data on cyberpsychosis isn't conclusive. Some patients show temporary improvement right before complete personality collapse. Well, that's fucking encouraging. She smiled thinly, made a note on her tablet. How are you feeling? Any violent ideation? Hallucinations? Paranoid thoughts? Derek considered lying, considered telling her what she wanted to hear, that he was fine, that everything was under control, that Derek Sullivan was still in charge of Derek Sullivan's meat and chrome. But what was the point? She'd see through it, and even if she didn't, he'd only be lying to himself. The chrome wants to kill you, he said flatly. Right now, sitting here, it's running calculations on how to neutralize you before you can call for help. 17 different methods, ranked by probability of success. The most efficient involves crushing your windpipe before you can scream, then breaking Vic's neck when he comes to investigate. Doctor, Vance went very still, but to her credit, she didn't run. And what does Derek want? Derek wants to apologize for thinking that. Derek wants to be horrified by those thoughts instead of just observing them. Derek wants to feel something other than this constant analytical assessment of everyone as potential threats or targets or obstacles. That's good. That self-awareness is good. It means there's still enough organic consciousness to recognize the aberrant thought patterns, to distinguish between you and the cyberware compulsions. For now. But it's getting harder. The chrome is louder every day, drowning out the meat. And I don't know how much longer I can hold on. She made more notes, nodded slowly. That's why the surgery is so critical. The longer we wait, the more permanent the damage becomes. Neural pathways get pruned and rerouted. Personality structures that don't serve the chrome-optimized consciousness get deleted as redundant data. Eventually, there's nothing left to save. And you think removing the chrome will reverse that? That cutting out the machines will magically restore Derek Sullivan? No. I think removing the chrome will stop the progression. Give your organic brain a chance to heal and rebuild. But the Derek Sullivan you were before the augmentations? He's probably gone. The best we can hope for is Derek Sullivan version 2.0, similar to the original, but fundamentally changed by the experience. Derek absorbed that, tried to feel something about it. Grief, maybe, for the person he'd been. Relief that there was any path forward at all. But mostly he just felt tired, worn down by the constant struggle to maintain himself against the tide of chrome and calculation. What if it doesn't work? What if we remove all the chrome and I'm still... He gestured vaguely at himself, at the thing he'd become. Then we've learned something about the neurology of cyberpsychosis, and we'll try other interventions. Brain dance therapy, pharmaceutical treatments, experimental neural reconstruction, and if none of that works... She paused, chose her words carefully. Then we discuss end-of-life options. You mean you let MaxTac put me down? I mean we explore alternatives that prioritize your dignity and autonomy over society's need to neutralize threats. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The surgery is a good first step. Let's take it and see what happens. She left after that. Promised to coordinate with Vic on post-surgical therapy protocols. Reminded Derek that she was available if he needed to talk before the procedure. He watched her go. Watched the way she moved. Cautious but not quite fearful. Professional distance maintained, but not quite cold. She was a good therapist, he realized. She saw him as a person struggling with illness, not as a monster waiting to erupt. That should have comforted him. Instead, it just made him sad, because he wasn't sure she was right. Misty brought dinner that evening. Real food, not the synthetic nutrient paste Derek had been subsisting on. Noodles with vegetables and synth meat that almost tasted like chicken. She sat with him while he ate. Presence somehow comforting despite his difficulty with human interaction. Vic says you're doing the right thing, she said, her voice soft. Getting the chrome removed, it takes courage to choose weakness over strength. I don't feel courageous. I feel terrified. That's what courage is. Doing the scary thing because it's right, even when every instinct screams to run the other way. Derek pushed the noodles around his bowl, watched them move with the precision of someone whose hands were military-grade servo motors. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think people can come back from this? From cyberpsychosis? Or is it just damage control until the inevitable? Misty was quiet for a moment, and Derek appreciated that she was actually thinking about the question instead of offering empty platitudes. I think, she finally said, that we're all constantly becoming different versions of ourselves. Every experience changes us, reshapes us, makes us into someone slightly different than who we were. The question isn't whether you can become Derek Sullivan again. It's whether you can become someone you're willing to be. That sounds like something from one of your tarot cards. She laughed, a sound like wind chimes. Guilty. But that doesn't make it untrue. You've been changed by the chrome, by the cyberpsychosis, by everything you've been through. You can't undo that. But you can decide who you want to be going forward and then do the work to become that person. Derek thought about that after she left, alone in his small room with nothing but his thoughts and his chrome and his fragmented sense of self. Who did he want to be? The question seemed almost absurd, given that he'd spent months barely maintaining control over who he was, let alone making decisions about who he'd become. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the first step toward humanity was reclaiming the ability to want, to choose, to decide based on something other than tactical analysis and calculated efficiency. He wanted to be someone Yuki could love again. Wanted to be someone who could walk into a bar without everyone going silent with fear. Wanted to be someone who saw other people as people instead of as data streams and threat assessments. He wanted to be human, whatever that meant, in a city that did everything possible to make humanity a liability. Derek lay back on the bed, stared at the ceiling, and for the first time in months let himself hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a way back from the edge. The surgery was scheduled for 0600, Victor's clinic. Empty except for Vic and Misty and the anesthesiologist Vic had brought in for the procedure. Derek sat on the operating chair, staring at the tools laid out on the surgical tray. Precision instruments designed to separate chrome from meat without killing the patient in the process. Last chance to back out, Vic said, prepping the anesthesia. Once we start, we're committed. Can't put the neural processor back in without doing significant additional damage. Derek thought about it. Really thought about it. One final moment of clarity before they took apart the machine he'd become. The chrome whispered its seductive promises. Strength, speed, efficiency, transcendence beyond the limitations of meat. All he had to do was stand up, walk out, embrace what he was becoming. But he remembered Yuki's voice, small and broken, asking him to come back. Remembered Dr. Vance's carefully maintained professionalism in the face of his barely restrained violence. Remembered Misty's kindness, Vic's patience, all the people who'd refused to give up on him even when he'd given up on himself. Do it, Derek said. Cut it out. All of it. Make me human again. Or at least as close as we can get. Vic nodded, satisfied, and activated the anesthesia. Derek felt the cold rush of chemicals through his sin veins, felt his consciousness starting to fade, felt the chrome screaming in protest as the meat reasserted control one final time. His last thought before the darkness took him was of Yuki's face, smiling, before he'd gotten the first augmentation, before he'd started down the path that led to this moment, strapped to an operating table while they cut away the machines that had nearly destroyed him. He hoped she'd still recognize him when this was over. He hoped he'd still recognize himself. Epilogue. Derek Sullivan woke up weak, properly weak, for the first time in over a year. His limbs were meat, organic tissue and bone instead of military-grade chrome and carbon fiber. His eyes were basic human optics. No tactical overlays or threat assessments or zoom functions. His spine was vulnerable bone instead of reinforced chromium. His lungs were meat instead of synthetic. His entire body was nothing but flesh and blood and weakness. It was the most human he'd felt in months. The recovery had taken 6 weeks. 6 surgeries spread out over time to let his body adjust to the loss of major systems. They'd removed the neural processor first, then the Kiroshi optics, then the cyber arms one at a time. The sin lungs had come out 3rd week, replaced with organic tissue cloned from his own cells. By the end, he was baseline human, augmented only by the medical chrome necessary to keep him alive. Subdermal armor he could barely feel. Internal medical monitors that operated below conscious awareness. Dr. Vance had been right. Derek Sullivan version 1.0 was gone, replaced by something different. He still carried scars. Psychological ones that no surgery could remove, memories of what it felt like to see humans as nothing but data. Moments when the chrome had whispered its seductions and he'd been tempted to listen. But he could feel again, could look at a sunset and appreciate its beauty without analyzing the wavelengths of light, could eat food and taste it, could touch objects and feel texture, could experience emotion without it being filtered through a tactical assessment algorithms. He'd called Yuki on the 3rd week of recovery, hands shaking, from muscle weakness, not cyberpsychosis. She'd answered on the 2nd ring, and he'd heard her breath catch when she heard his voice. Derek, it's me, the real me, or at least closer to real than I've been in a long time. They'd met at that ramen shop in Japantown, the one from their first date. Derek had arrived early, sat at a table in the corner, watched the door with human eyes that couldn't zoom or track or analyze. When Yuki walked in, he felt his heart rate elevate. Organic response to emotion, not tactical assessment of threat. She looked older, worn down by months of worry and grief. But she smiled when she saw him. That same bright smile he'd fallen in love with, and Derek felt something crack open in his chest. Relief, maybe, or joy, or just the simple recognition that he was capable of feeling at all. Hey, she'd said, sliding into the seat across from him. Hey, you look different. No chrome. Well, almost no chrome. Just the medical essentials. Everything else is meat. She'd reached across the table, taken his hand in hers. Her skin was warm, soft, perfectly human. Derek had squeezed gently, marveled at his own ability to calibrate pressure without tactical calculations, to touch without crushing. I missed you, she'd said, and her eyes were wet with tears. I missed me too. They'd talked for hours, eating ramen that Derek could actually taste, drinking sake that actually affected him. He'd told her about the cyberpsychosis, about the chrome and the calculations and the slow dissolution of his personality. She'd told him about the months he'd been gone, about the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, worrying that he'd gone full psycho, that she'd see his face on the news feeds as another cyberpsycho flatlined by MaxTech. I'm not fixed, he'd admitted. The therapy is ongoing. The personality damage is permanent. I'm not the person I was before the chrome, but I'm trying to be someone worth being. That's enough, she'd said. That's more than enough. They were taking it slow. Coffee dates? Walks through the city, conversation that rebuilt trust one word at a time. Derek had moved to a new apartment, something in a quieter neighborhood, away from the chrome clinics and the murk bars and the streets that reminded him of what he'd been. He'd found work as a security consultant again. Lower-tier clients now, nothing that required chrome or violence, just risk assessment and protocol design. It was boring, profoundly, beautifully boring. And Derek had never been so grateful for anything in his life. Dr. Vance had been right about something else too. He'd never be completely free of the cyberpsychosis. The scars were too deep, the damage too extensive. There were still days when he looked at his human hands and felt phantom sensations of chrome. Still moments when he analyzed threats without meaning to. Still nights when he woke up from dreams of crushing windpipes and calculating kill shots. But he was fighting. Every day, every hour, fighting to stay human in a city that made humanity a weakness. And most days, he won. He sat in his new apartment now, looking out over Night City's glittering skyline, neon and chrome and endless noise. Somewhere out there, other Derek Sullivans were getting their first augmentation, taking that first step down a path they didn't understand. Somewhere, Ripper Docs were installing chrome without explaining the real costs. Somewhere, corporations were profiting from the slow destruction of human consciousness. Night City would never stop creating cyberpsychos. It was built on chrome and capitalism and the commodification of the human body. But maybe, just maybe, one person fighting back made a difference. Maybe Derek Sullivan's survival was a tiny act of rebellion against the city that had tried to consume him. His phone buzzed. Yuki, asking if he wanted to grab dinner. Something simple. Something human. Derek smiled. Actually smiled, felt it in his meat face with his human muscles, and typed back a response. He'd survived cyberpsychosis. He'd chosen humanity over Chrome. Weakness over strength. Feeling over efficiency. He'd looked into the abyss of his own dissolution and stepped back from the edge. Now he just had to keep walking away, one human step at a time, for the rest of his life. It wouldn't be easy. But then again, nothing worth doing ever was. Derek Sullivan stood, pocketed his phone, and headed out into Night City's neon-soaked streets. Human, vulnerable, alive. And for the first time in a year, that was enough.